Thanks for watching and liking the video. I was standing next to my wife at her company's reception when an investor walked up, glanced at me, and asked her, "So, who's this with you?" She didn't hesitate. She smiled, touched his arm lightly, and said, "Oh, he just gave me a ride. My car's in the shop. Not my husband. Not my name. Not even a second glance. Just a driver." I stood there in my tailored suit, the one I wear to meetings where I present million-dollar projects, and in 7 quiet words, she erased me. Across the room stood Cameron, the venture capitalist everyone had been talking about that night. He was close enough to hear everything. I saw the faint curve of his mouth, the kind of smile people wear when they're entertained by something they shouldn't be. He knew exactly who I was. We had met before, twice. Back when she still introduced me properly, when she said my name with pride, when she held my arm like it meant something. Now I was nobody. I didn't say anything. I didn't correct her. I didn't make a scene. I just turned and walked out. I moved through the ballroom past champagne tables, past clusters of executives speaking in polished tones, past laughter that suddenly felt hollow. My phone buzzed in my pocket again and again, but I didn't check it. That was the last time I ever stood next to her in public. 6 years of marriage ended in that moment. Not with shouting, not with a fight, but with silence and a sentence that reduced me to nothing. And the look on Cameron's face told me something else too. He understood exactly what she was doing. I just didn't know yet how badly she had miscalculated. I'm an architect. I design shopping centers and office complexes for commercial developers. It's not flashy work, but it's solid. It's steady. It's the kind of work that builds things that last. She, on the other hand, lives in a world where perception is everything. A PR director at a fast-growing tech company, always surrounded by cameras, conversations, and carefully crafted impressions. Her world thrives on attention, on appearances, on being seen. It wasn't always like this. 3 years ago, she used to bring me to events like that. She would smile, loop her arm through mine, and say, "This is my husband. He's an architect." And there was pride in her voice. Real pride. Back then, I believed it. But things changed. 4 months ago, Cameron entered the picture. A new investor. Powerful, polished, the kind of man who walks into a room and immediately shifts its gravity. Decisions followed him. Opportunities bent toward him. And slowly, she began to change too. She started coming home later, saying meetings ran long. When I asked about events, she would tell me I wouldn't enjoy them, that it was just work talk. Conversations became shorter. Her attention distant. Then, 2 weeks ago, she asked me to come with her. She said important people would be there. I thought she meant the board. I thought she wanted me beside her. So I wore my best suit, drove across the city, and showed up ready to stand with my wife. But when I met her at the entrance, something fell off. No smile, no warmth, no kiss, just a quick glance like I was already out of place. Inside the ballroom, she drifted away from me almost immediately, joining a group near the bar. I followed at a distance, waiting for the moment she would pull me in, introduce me, include me. That moment never came. For 20 minutes, I stood there holding a glass I didn't want, listening to conversations I wasn't part of. She spoke confidently about projections and strategies, her voice full of life, just not for me. And then Cameron walked over. The shift in her was instant. Her posture straightened, her smile widened, her energy changed. She laughed easily, leaned in as he spoke, like the rest of the room had disappeared. I watched it all, and then came a question that ended everything. "Who's this with you?" Her answer didn't just dismiss me. It erased 6 years of shared life, of late nights, of quiet mornings, of everything we had built together. So I left. I drove home in silence, the city lights blurring past, as if the world itself had softened. When I got back, I took off my suit carefully, hung it in the closet, and placed my wedding ring on the kitchen counter. I stood there for a long time, staring at it. Then I packed a bag. When she came home, the sound of her heels echoed through the house. She walked into the kitchen and saw everything. The ring, the bag, the quiet finality of it all. Her first words weren't regret. They were anger. She said I embarrassed her, that people kept asking where I went. I told her calmly that I had done exactly what she said. I was someone who gave her a ride. Nothing more. She tried to explain it away, saying it was professional, that I didn't understand how her world worked, that she couldn't mix personal life with business. But I understood perfectly. I understood that if I was something she needed to hide, then I didn't belong in her life anymore. I picked up my bag and walked toward the door. She called after me, her voice rising, accusing me of overreacting, of ruining everything over nothing. I didn't turn back. The next morning, I moved out. 3 days later, I filed for divorce. The call started immediately, dozens of them. Messages that shifted from anger to desperation. Late-night texts trying to explain, to justify, to rewrite what had already happened. I didn't respond. But one night, I checked her social media. Photos from that event were already posted. In every picture, she was smiling, and Cameron was right beside her. The caption said, "With the people who believe in our vision." There wasn't a single picture of me, not one mention of a husband. I scrolled through the comments slowly, each one landing heavier than the last. Her coworkers, her industry friends, people who had stood in the same rooms as us before, all asking the same question in different ways. "Wait, weren't you married? Who was that guy you used to be with? I thought you had a husband." No one answered them. No one corrected it. It was as if I'd been erased so completely that even the memory of me had started to fade. And Cameron had already stepped into the space I left behind. 2 weeks after I walked away, he was sitting next to her at another company event, this time at the head table. I saw the photo on the company's public page. The transition was effortless, almost rehearsed, like I had never been there to begin with. They called it a professional partnership. That's how it was presented to the world. But anyone paying attention could see the truth in the small details, the way they looked at each other, the way they moved in sync, the way they left events at the same time, without explanation. She had rebuilt her public identity. She was no longer the architect's wife. Now she was the woman beside the venture capitalist, the woman who mattered because of who stood next to her. I didn't feel satisfaction. There was no sense of victory in it, just a quiet emptiness where anger used to live. She had made her choice, and I had accepted it the only way that made sense. I walked away. The divorce moved quickly. There were no children, no shared property to fight over, just accounts to divide and documents to sign. Clean, efficient, almost cold. I blocked her on everything, deleted every photo, every message, every trace of the life we had built together. I stopped going to the places that still held echoes of us. The restaurant where we used to sit in the corner booth, the coffee shop near our office, the gym where we once planned our evenings. A mutual friend told me a month later that she and Cameron were inseparable now. Officially, it was still business, meetings, dinners, conferences. But the truth didn't need to be spoken out loud. It was in the way they carried themselves, the quiet understanding between them, the way they disappeared from crowded rooms at the same time. Her entire identity had shifted. And for the first time, I realized something clearly. She had always needed to stand next to someone to feel important. I didn't. 6 weeks after filing for divorce, my senior partner, Richard, asked me to lunch. He had been in the industry for decades, a man who understood both buildings and people with the same quiet precision. We sat in a small, quiet bistro downtown. He didn't ask about my marriage. He didn't offer sympathy. He just looked at me and said, "When someone refuses to introduce you, it's never a mistake." Then he slid a folder across the table. Inside was a proposal for a major project, a full renovation of a historic district in the center of the city. 8 months of work, a full team, a fee that would change the scale of my business entirely. The client had requested me specifically. They had seen my work. They trusted my approach. Richard leaned back and said something I won't forget. "Your name already means something. You don't need anyone else to make it matter." I signed the contract that same afternoon, and for the first time in months, I felt grounded again. On that project site, there was no confusion about who I was. My name was on the blueprints. Contractors, investors, and city officials spoke to me directly, with respect that came from what I had built, not who I stood beside. I didn't need to be introduced. My work spoke for me. 10 weeks after filing, I stopped at a coffee shop near my office. It was supposed to be just another quiet moment in a routine I was rebuilding. Then I saw her. She was sitting alone by the window. She looked different, tired. The sharp confidence she used to carry like armor was gone. She stared at her phone, scrolling without focus, like she was trying to distract herself from something she couldn't escape. Then she looked up and saw me. She stood immediately and walked toward me before I could move. "We need to talk," she said. Her voice was softer than I remembered. Careful, almost uncertain. She said she'd had time to think, that she was wrong about everything. I didn't sit down. I just looked at her and said, calmly, "You weren't wrong." She blinked, confused. "You made a choice," I continued. "That night, when you introduced me the way you did, you showed everyone exactly what I was worth to you. Everything that happened after that wasn't a mistake. It was the result." She tried to explain, saying she had been under pressure, that she was afraid her personal life would interfere with her career. I stopped her. "You didn't panic," I said. "You chose between respect and status, between honesty and appearance." She went quiet, and in that silence, I realized something important. She still didn't fully understand what she had done. She was still trying to frame it as fear instead of a decision. And I was done explaining. I picked up my coffee when my name was called and walked past her without looking back, leaving her standing there in the middle of the cafe, surrounded by strangers who didn't know the story, but could feel its weight. I didn't feel cruel. I felt clear. Weeks later, I stood inside a penthouse I had helped design, walking a family through the space. I showed them every room, explained the details, pointed out the preserved brickwork and the way the light moved across the floors in the afternoon. Cameron was there. So was his wife. And their children. He spoke about investment potential, about long-term value. His wife talked about the neighborhood, the nearby park, the small details that turn a space into a home. The kids ran ahead, claiming rooms, imagining their lives inside walls that hadn't yet held their memories. They stayed for nearly an hour, moving through the space like they already belonged there. Not once did Cameron acknowledge any history between us. Not a glance. Not a pause. Just business. When they left, his wife lingered at the doorway and said softly, "This place feels like it has a story." I nodded. That's the point. 3 days later, Cameron called. His voice was calm, detached. He said they wanted to move forward. By the end of the week, the contract was signed. A deposit hit the account, clean, immediate, without emotion. 2 weeks later, we met again at a title office. Glass walls, stacks of documents, quiet professionalism, everything in its place, everything exactly as it should be. Cameron sat across from me in the conference room, reviewing each page carefully without rushing. His movements were precise, controlled, like someone used to making decisions that carried weight. His wife sat nearby, smiling politely at the staff, keeping the kids occupied with crayons and a tablet in the waiting area. It was a normal scene, quiet, organized, a life that ran on structure and unspoken understanding. When everything was finalized, Cameron reached across the table and shook my hand. His grip was firm, his expression steady. He said he was looking forward to being part of the community, that his wife was excited about the neighborhood. He thanked me for the walkthrough, for the clarity, for making the decision easy. There was no mention of my past, no awkward pause, no acknowledgement of anything beyond the work. To him, my ex-wife simply didn't exist outside the context of conference rooms and company events. Whatever had been between them, or whatever had been implied, was now irrelevant. It was over in the most practical sense. A month later, a mutual friend called. He told me she had stopped showing up at company events around the same time Cameron's relocation became public knowledge. Someone at her office mentioned she had taken a leave of absence. No one seemed to know why. And more importantly, no one seemed to ask. In that world, things move quickly. People adapt. They shift their attention forward without lingering on what falls behind. After the call ended, I sat at my desk for a long time, my hands resting on the edge of a blueprint. Not because I was trying to feel something, but because I was listening for it. The anger that once filled every quiet moment wasn't there anymore. The need to prove something, to win, to be seen, it had faded. What remained was something softer, quieter, like a room after everyone has left. Empty, but stable. For the first time in a long while, it felt like the ground beneath me had stopped shifting, Spring arrived, and the project moved forward the way all large projects do, slowly at first, then all at once. Scaffolding rose and disappeared. Old wiring was stripped away, replaced with new systems hidden behind freshly restored walls. Contractors debated measurements with intensity, voices echoing through unfinished hallways. City inspectors walked through with clipboards and tired expressions, checking boxes that determined progress. Some days, I stood on the sidewalk and watched sunlight settle against the brick, warming surfaces that had stood for decades. And I found myself thinking about how much of life comes down to a simple decision: what you're willing to build and what you're willing to let fall apart. One afternoon, I saw Cameron's family again. This time, there was no formality, no polished image, just his wife standing outside with their children, pointing at the building like it already belonged to them. She asked the foreman if the windows would open the way they used to. When he said yes, she smiled with quiet relief, like she had just been given something small but meaningful. Cameron arrived a few minutes later, carrying a paper bag of pastries. And for a moment, he didn't look like an investor or a powerful figure in a tailored suit. He looked like what he really was: a man trying to take care of his family, a man focused on getting the details right. He nodded at me once, not warmly, not coldly, just acknowledgement. Two professionals sharing the same space. Then he turned back to his children, and that was it. That was the truth of everything, standing clearly in the open where nothing needed to be interpreted or explained. Months passed. One evening, long after the workers had left, I returned to the site alone. The building was quiet in a way it never is during the day. Dust lingered in the air, catching the dim light like a soft haze. The elevator creaked as it carried me upward, each floor lighting up one by one. When the doors opened, I stepped into the penthouse. It was empty. No furniture, no voices, just space. Possibility. I walked slowly through each room, my footsteps echoing against walls that would soon hold someone else's life. I paused at the window and looked out over the city. The skyline stretched endlessly, orange lights glowing across rooftops, reflections shimmering on glass towers. Cars moved below like streams of light, constant and distant. Somewhere out there, people were still chasing appearances, still trying to build lives that looked right from the outside. Somewhere out there, my ex-wife was still trying to make sense of a decision that didn't need explanation, only acceptance. And here I was, standing inside something real, something I had built, something that didn't require anyone else to validate it, to name it, or to introduce it. It simply existed because I made it possible. And for the first time, that was enough. That was more than enough. That's all for now. But I'd really like to hear your thoughts. What would you have done in that situation? If this story stayed with you, don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this.